Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Living on Campus episode of our 2020 Family Orientation Series. As parents of incoming students, the majority of your students will be living on campus in the residence halls or at the RIT Inn. We want to make sure you understand about what that situation will be like and what they'll experience, as well as the resources available in the different areas for students living in those spaces. So joining me today is our Director of Residence Life, Harold Fields. Harold, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chelsea.
Before we get into the question, can you introduce yourself and explain a little bit about what you do at RIT?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. Again, my name is Harold Fields. I'm the Director of the Center for Residence Life. So I'm responsible for the department that hires, trains, and supervises the resident advisors that will support your students when they're here with us living on campus.
Great. So I'm going to start with kind of a bigger question. We know as staff, but a lot of people don't understand that there are actually two offices at RIT that really deal with housing and living on campus. It's your office, Residence Life, and RIT Housing. So can we start with you explaining what those two offices are and why a student or a parent would go to one or the other?
Absolutely. That's a great question and one that we answer all the time. One of the easiest ways to think about it is the staff in RIT Housing, they really focus on the buildings, the assignments, the billing, some of the administrative and logistical work about getting your students into their housing assignment, while my staff really focuses on the people. We work with the students once they're here. We support them as they work through conflicts with roommates or get to know their roommates. We help them develop new skills and navigate things like doing their laundry for the first time or living away from home.
Well, we're hoping parents are helping get their students ready to do laundry now before they come to campus. But for those who don't quite get it, we're there to help, right?
Absolutely.
So speaking of laundry, can you talk a little bit about the different amenities that are available in the residence halls on campus?
Absolutely. Many of our halls are organized in a similar way. So most of them are corridor style housing. You will find shared bathrooms on those floors. All of our floors typically have either a kitchenette or a lounge. Some of them may have both, depending on the layout of the particular building. Typically in our kitchenettes, you'll find not only a sink and some counter space and tables and chairs, along with the television and the microwave, but new for this year, we will have micro fridges in each student room in the residence halls and at the RITN. In addition to those things that are pretty standard in residence halls, there are free laundry facilities in the tunnels underneath our residence halls. And our tunnels are one of the things that many of our students like the most about living in our residence halls. Our tunnels connect all of our residential buildings on the residence hall side of campus. So all the halls are connected by these tunnels. These tunnels actually go all the way to Grace Watson Hall, where many of the first year students have traditionally had most of their meals, as well as to NTID and the LBJ classroom building, as well as the SDC, the Student Development Center, where there's another dining establishment. Also in the tunnels, besides laundry rooms and access to dining, you'll find the corner store that's open pretty late most days, as well as the post office. So if your students are expecting any packages or need to ship things out, we do have a full service post office in the tunnels as well.
Great. So you said it kind of fast. So in case people listening missed it, I want to point out that laundry is free at RIT, which is a huge benefit. And I know our parents are always really excited to hear they don't have to send quarters or fund a little card. It's free for our students. Also, the tunnels are actually really cool. There's a bunch of murals on the tunnels that are painted by students. And if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, we actually have a tour of the tunnels that one of our students did. So please take a peek at that. They're really beautiful and it's fun to look at. So it's not only very convenient for our students who don't have to go outside if it's raining or it's cold, but it's also a fun place to be and to look at our great art on campus. So you said that you are responsible for training and supporting the RAs, our resident advisors. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of support RAs provide the students that are living in the residence halls?
Absolutely. Our resident advisors are peer leaders that support your students from move-in day through the day they move out. They are one of the first resources that many students turn to, whether it is as they work through new interpersonal relationships, whether it is setting up those new friend groups or navigating their roommate agreements and their roommate living experiences together, but also things like registering for classes or figuring out how to talk to a professor. Many times your students will talk to their RAs about the things that older students have already experienced before them and ask for their advice and their perspectives. RAs do a great job of also helping students understand the safety expectations for living in a shared space and helping them understand what policies are applicable to our residence halls and other living communities.
Yes, RAs are a great resource for a lot of reasons. You know, in other videos and a lot of time in my conversations with parents, I talk about how an academic advisor is a good place to start for a lot of questions. But I think I would say that same thing about an RA, especially if a student is looking for a more pure or peer or, you know, a experienced student perspective. The RAs have a lot of training and a lot of information that they can share with our incoming students. So one of the big things, as you mentioned, that RAs do is help work through any roommate disagreements or issues that might come up. Can you talk about what strategies students can use to build a positive relationship with their roommates?
One of the chief strategies, and something that I'm a big proponent for, is the roommate agreement. And actually, this summer, your students will receive an email with information about their roommate agreement before they ever move in. So once your student receives the email with their roommate agreement, they'll actually see a profile rating section that helps compare the things that your student put on their housing application to the things that their roommate put on theirs. It'll let them know where the areas where they agree and align completely and where the areas they might want to talk about before they move in. The roommate agreement is a great way to kind of set ground rules for how to manage conflict if it does arrive. And what are the kind of sticking points that might be ways to avoid conflict ever beginning in the first place. It also talks a little bit about communication preferences so that your student and their roommate can decide upfront how they want to communicate with each other, particularly about things that might be challenging for folks who are new to sharing a space together. If your students arrive and they're trying to work through their roommate relationship and need some help, again, their RAs are a great resource, and the first place I'd recommend that they start. They can revisit that roommate agreement with their RAs. If there are students who struggle to complete their roommate agreement with their roommate, our professional staff are also going to be available and will step in to help. So if at any point, whether it's before arrival, as your student is navigating the roommate agreement, or after they're already living together, they are more than welcome to connect with our professional staff to seek some support in mediating whatever the conflict is. And we do have residence coordinators who serve in on-call capacity who are available every day. So if it's a true emergency after hours, public safety will help them get in touch with us. During the workday, they're available via their offices, telephone, or email to help support your students through any conflicts or other challenges that they might experience.
Great. And I think a piece of advice that I'd like to share with parents regarding their students' roommates is remember that living with somebody, especially in these close quarters, is new for a lot of our students, and conflicts are pretty common, right? Like that's going to happen with anybody sharing a space, and it's normal. And the advice I would give to parents is let your student figure it out and give them the tools that they need to have open communication with their roommates and to bring in an RA if they have to. But you know, a lot of times these disagreements will work themselves out. And as parents often hear things when they're at their worst. So your student will call you when they're really upset and you'll be at home stewing about it. But in the meantime, they've worked it out. So anytime your student calls you with a concern, such as a roommate disagreement, my advice would be to step back and stay calm and then reach out to your student, you know, the next day or even a few hours later and help them work through that if they haven't figured it out on their own. So I've been getting this question quite a bit lately about what should parents bring or what should they help their students bring? So is there a checklist of what they should bring? Are there any tips that you want to share, Harold, about things that you think students absolutely need or absolutely shouldn't bring to the residence halls?
Absolutely. So there is a checklist, and I don't believe it's posted online at the moment.
It,
It is. Is it back up?
as of this week, unless as of this week it's up. So unless it went down
Perfect.
from yesterday.
And so, as we mentioned before, microfridges are a new amenity in our communities. And as a result, that checklist was being updated to remove refrigerators from the list of things to bring. But related to appliances, some things that you don't want to bring are any cooking appliances. So coffee makers with automatic shutoff are fine, but toasters, toaster ovens, Foreman grills, air fryers, things like that, Instapots are unfortunately prohibited in the residence halls. This year is obviously a little different than other years, but the advice that I'd offer is to try to pack a little bit light. Be thoughtful about what things you absolutely need to bring for school. What are the things that you need for this experience? Knowing that many of our students will travel home in November and plan to stay there until spring semester starts and conduct their finals remotely. It's important to be thoughtful about what things you want to bring with you and what things you not want to bring. We mentioned already that laundry is free, but you do need to provide your own laundry detergent. So some of those things are often things that people don't think about that you want to make sure you're being thoughtful about. What are the supplies that you need for your personal hygiene, for your personal comfort, but how do you make sure that the things that you pack are reasonable? Because it's unlikely that you need to bring everything that's in your room at home.
Yes, I think the packing light is such a good piece of advice. I think every year we see a family pull up with 2 cars, and then when they leave, one of the cars is still full because they just didn't need all the things they thought they did or it didn't fit. So I think it's a really good piece of advice to be thoughtful about what your student packs and what they really need when they're here on campus. So speaking of cars, let's talk about that. Can students have cars on campus?
Students can have cars on campus. They will need to apply for a parking permit, though, if they would like to have their car here. That does include students who live at the RIT Inn. For students at the Inn who would like to bring a car, they can receive a credit on their student account to help offset the cost of that parking permit, depending on which permit they select. So students don't have to have cars, they can. We do have a shuttle system that it does run, including the RIT Inn. And many students who live at the Inn do not have cars, or they choose not to bring them to campus and they rely on the shuttles. So it is important to note that we do have a pretty robust shuttle system. Our parking and transportation office is very responsive to student feedback. If students have questions or concerns about either parking, shuttles, or other modes of transportation, and they are actively innovating in that space around parking and transportation.
Mm-hmm. And a student permit, if they do have their car on campus, is $100 for the year. And as Harold said, there are different shuttle options. So if your student doesn't have a car, you know, there are options to get to the grocery store or other places that they might need to go. So this question I actually took word for word from a parent because I really liked how it was worded and it made me laugh a little bit. Are eating options opened at weird hours of the day and night?
The short answer is yes. We know that our students on this campus don't keep the same hours when they're here that they might have kept at home during high school. So I mentioned the corner store earlier. The corner store is not only a convenience store, but a place where you can grab some grab and go items, whether they're healthy things like salad and fruit, or heartier meal items like pasta or something else that you might reheat. There's even some frozen meals there. That is actually open to almost 3 a.m. There are other regular service meal options that are open pretty late into the evening. That schedule is subject to change, and I'm sure will actually be probably a little bit more robust this year, considering all of the efforts that we're making to maintain low density in places where folks are going to be gathering in person. And so I'd love to defer to my colleagues in dining to confirm what the final schedule is going to be. But we traditionally have had meal options open late into the evening, and I am assuming that's only going to be expanded this year.
Right. And like Harold said, we're still determining things like hours. And as you've probably already seen in one of the family orientation newsletters, is the dining plans have been shifted for this year. But there are a lot of dining options on campus. So when the student gets here and they start to explore, there will be a lot of options for them, even though at this point, we're not entirely sure what those options are going to look like this year. So speaking of that, Harold, with everything we've talked about, can you talk a little bit about what will look differently in the residence halls in light of COVID guidelines?
Absolutely. So I think there's a number of things that will look different. One of the things that I'm really happy about that's going to look different is that our facilities team is actually committing to cleaning all the bathrooms and high touch areas twice a day. For those of you who are unaware, typically the facilities team would clean every floor once a day, and weekend service wouldn't necessarily include both days. Now there's a commitment for 7 days a week, twice a day, restrooms and high touch areas, which I'm really excited about to help maintain a clean environment for your students. One of the other things that is important to note that is different this year is the guest restrictions and guest policy. So as we start the semester, there won't be any guests allowed from other buildings or other communities in the residence halls while we start the semester and understand where we are in accordance and abiding by our safety plans for reopening. So there will be some guest limitations to start the semester. Related to that, we have some other amenities I didn't mention earlier. Places like Richie's, our game room that's in the tunnels, that we're not quite prepared to open yet. We really want to make sure that we have a good understanding and grasp of the current state of our campus and the state of our population and community to make sure that we're meeting everybody's needs and opening those things in the safest way possible. Obviously, there's been lots of discussion about occupancy for indoor gatherings. So that does impact the occupancy of the lounges and kitchenettes. They will be reduced this year, and there will be occupancy signs on every floor to make sure that students are aware of how many people should be in a space at any given time. So those are a few of the things that will look different. Besides that, our office is actually divided into 3 physical spaces. We have 3 different office suites. We are going to be funneling all of our walk-in traffic to our Gleason office, where we have our service desk. That is staffed 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So most of the time when your students are awake and about in the res halls, there will be someone at the service desk if they have an in-person question, but we'll always be able to be reached by email, by telephone, by video chat as well.
Great, thank you for that outline. And I think one thing that's a benefit to our incoming students is that this won't all be new to them. It'll all be just the way it is, because when they come to campus, these things will be set up and that's how they'll learn it. You know, and we look forward to having them here and to working through this semester together, even if it looks a little differently than it typically does. So Harold, I've been asking everybody this last question, which is either within your area of expertise or outside of it, as somebody who's worked on a college campus for so many years, what would be your #1 piece of advice that you would give to parents of incoming students this summer?
I think my #1 tip for parents is kind of twofold. I think the first part is communicate, but I think the other part is to also provide some trust in your student. And so I do think it's really important that if there's things that are important to you that will be helpful for you and feeling comfortable with your student being away from home, that you communicate those things to your student, but then that you also trust them to make good decisions and to advocate for themselves appropriately. As Chelsea mentioned, offer all the support you can to your student when they check in with you, when they're having a tough day, when they're frustrated with someone, whether it's their roommate or someone else, offer up that support and help empower them to make good decisions, help guide them back towards the resources that you're learning about, because you're obviously an actively engaged partner in your student's education if you're watching this video, but really trust them to try to take that step first. Really empower them to make good decisions and prove to you that they're the young adult that you raised them to be.
I don't think I could have worded that better myself. That was excellent advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And to our parents, I know this was a pretty quick overview of living on campus. If you have any additional questions about any of the things we mentioned, parking or dining or the residence halls, you know, please feel free to send us a message and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. And all those individual offices are always happy to answer your questions as well. Harold, as always, thank you for your time and for your expertise. I really appreciated this time with you.
No problem.
And to all the parents watching, thank you as well for joining us. And as always, we ask you to help us prepare your student for life on campus this fall by having them read that RIT pledge and take it and be prepared to do their part as a member of the RIT community when they come to campus this fall to keep the campus healthy and safe. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.